supervisors want to call it the air, or the judges just go with this? No. Heads, do you want to verify? Okay. Who speaks?
Wait. Oh, okay, hold on. Sorry. Alright, so you guys are speaking second? Sure. Alright, yes.
Second.
Second at first one.
We're ready if you guys are. Alright. Before we begin, do any judges have specific paradigm preferences they trust in?
Nothing extremely special. If it's in the final focus, it should be in the summary. I don't think there's anything else special in unorthodox.
Yeah. I mean, clean extensions, I'm going to vote on the more well-warranted, like, clearly weighed issue that's left at the end of the round. So be very explicit on why your warrant's true. Just, obviously you guys are good, but like, an author doesn't make something true. Explain why the author got to that conclusion. And I will not call a card unless I'm explicitly told to. So, and I like tried my best to strictly abide by that. So if at the end of the day something's unclear on the flow, yeah, I'll resolve it the best I can on the flow, and that's it. I will not call your evidence.
Opponents ready?
Yes. Yeah, actually, what's that?
Oh, and keep your own prep.
Okay.
Like, I'll keep some track of it, but try to keep your own.
Thank you. We're ready.
Tim ready. You and all three judges. Tim and I negate contention one state collapse. McChain Rice University statistically finds, quote, that U.S. troops are correlated with a decrease in the troop level of the host state. The presence of U.S. troops is not resulting in a large increase in security, as the host state itself is weakening. In Iraq specifically, Huron of Stanford University confirms that, quote, the more we do, the less will be done by parties in the area who the United States wants to build up their own capabilities. Yet the only good way to get rid of ISIS in the long run is to let local actors deal with it. This is because, as Mossy of the International Business Times finds, quote, the military superiority of the U.S. doesn't count for very much. Counterinsurgency is mostly political, so it's actually better to use local forces on the ground. Thus, Nasseri of the Real News finds that because, quote, the U.S. has made Iraq dependent for its security and defense, Iraq is vulnerable to all possible threats from the outside because it can't defend itself. Mueller of the International Studies Quarterly empirically impacts that, quote, the likelihood of militarily dependent developing democracies being able to maintain stability was 13%, while the likelihood of stability among developing democracies that were not dependent was 78%. This trade-off occurs across the entire region. Traub of the Center for International Cooperation explains that, quote, Obama has said that the United States will henceforward work through partners when it comes to counterterrorism, and it's precisely the American abdication that necessitated this new Arab activism. The result was, quote, the Arab League creating a response force of 40,000 military professionals from a variety of nations and will be adopted in a couple of weeks. Insofar as U.S. withdrawal has elicited regional action, the trade-off is clear that it is the U.S. that reduces regional commitments. This is problematic because Connery of the Cato Institute notes that, quote, states in the region have stronger economic and political ties with warring parties and a better understanding of the conflict. Comparatively, quote, American support for military action tends to decline dramatically at the prospect of an occupation that will entail casualties. The erosion of public support leads to the erosion of congressional support, resulting in serious divisions within the government directing intervention. The military is virtually assured of failure, end quote. Contention 2, human rights abuses. These occur in 3 different ways. First, the blind eye. Hassan of Foreign Policy writes that, in quote, the operation last summer in Amerili, U.S. forces turned a blind eye to the abusive conduct of militias, as the militias targeted minorities in the area. Militias and Iraqi security forces burned Sunni villages to the ground, destroyed homes, and looted entire villages. When we can protect people but we don't, they blame us for their suffering. Second, collective punishment. The MHRI writes in the last invasion, quote, the U.S. applied the method of collective punishment of civilians with the pretense that armed groups live among them. The U.S. bombed the city of Fallujah, killing more than 1,200 people, while women and elderly and children were being killed and families were driven out of their homes. And third, Paxton of the University of Utah writes that by invigorating corrupt governments, quote, a supportive intervention increases extrajudicial killing by 103%, disappearances by 239%, torture by 66%, and political imprisonment by 70%. The impact is twofold. First, lost soft power. The Center for Balkan Peace notes that, quote, formidable tasks will become even more difficult if charges of human rights abuses undermine America's military standing. Opponents of the U.S. exploit war crime charges to undermine America's credibility in military operations, and allies will find it difficult to support missions. In order to build coalitions and deploy troops effectively, the United States must have credibility as protect their human rights. Nye Harvard confirms this importance, writing that, quote, some transnational issues cannot be managed without the help of other countries, including infectious diseases, stability of global financial markets, international trade, WMDs, international crime, and terrorism. Second, increased terrorism. Piazza of the UNC writes that, quote, state violation of human rights makes terrorist appeals for support more effective. Brutal treatment of non-combatants by the state can facilitate mobilization efforts of militants, radicalizing formerly passive populations, and foster conditions under which ethnic, religious, or social groups experience communal discrimination, constructing collective grievances against the state. These are ripe for exploitation by terrorist groups, enhancing popular support for anti-system violence. Thus, he finds that reducing, quote, physical integrity rights by 1 unit out of 8 increases the number of terrorist attacks by between 17 and 40%. In fact, Alexander of the Washington Post finds, quote, that at least half of our losses and casualties in Iraq have come because of our program on detainee abuse. The number of U.S. soldiers who have died because of our torture policy is close to the number of lives lost on 9/11. Thus, we negate. Thank you.
Possible? Could we see the case just pretty far away? Thanks.
Can we like flash it to so you can keep the laptop?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. I literally like looked down right like when I was walking back into this room and I was like bleeding profusely from the head.
And how bad was it?
It's not bad. It was worse before. Like it's just like there's like a bigger cut than it looks like, but it was bleeding a lot. So,
Well, what's the last article?
The docking last article is called More Back.
Can you just stay here for 1 second? So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can see
like
the
this.
exact article? More actors.
Yeah.
Thank you. Starting prep now.
I guarantee your head's gonna be wrong. My head? Think so? Alright, I'll be back.
Thank you. So that was 24 seconds you said? You guys want like right there something? It's your choice. We'll be keeping track.
Is everybody ready? Sam and I affirm the resolution. Contention 1, undermining ISIL support. Patrick Coburn documents in his book, The Rise of Islamic State, while ISIL's threat is dependent on the support of Iraq's 5 million Sunnis. Norm Mollis of the Wall Street Journal explains that although many Sunnis personally dislike ISIL, they still support it because they view them as convenient battlefield allies against a repressive Shia regime. The U.S. can prevent this by organizing the Sunni tribes. Colonel Richard Welch explains that the tribal forces can penetrate and saturate areas, and U.S. forces will try to help them with coordination. The U.S. were to say privately, we'll support you, the Sunni tribes will rise up, and you'll see ISIL gone in a few months. There is precedence for success. Kenneth Pollock of the Brookings Institute reports how in 2007, U.S. ground troops helped Sunnis expel al-Qaeda in Iraq in the Anbar Awakening and set Iraq on a path towards political stability. However, Colonel Derek Harvey explains that the U.S. does not commit ground troops. The U.S. risks yielding primacy to Iran, threatening any Sunni Arab awakening. Pollock explains how the Iraqi government refuses to negotiate with the Sunnis because they don't believe they are organized enough. Sinan Adnan of the Institute of the Study of War explains the Iraqi government must reconnect with Iraq's disenfranchised Sunni population if an effective anti-ISIL program is to take hold within Sunni areas. Contention 2, preventing atrocities. We observe that preventing mass atrocities are in the best interest of the U.S. for 2 reasons. First, it is a moral imperative, as Adam Mellion of the University of Rhode Island explains, protecting universally established human rights constitutes a perfect duty, with a binding and enforceable obligation. This means that preventing mass atrocities is a moral imperative of the U.S. and a priori to other concerns. Second, from a utilitarian perspective, as Obama himself has argued, preventing mass atrocities and genocide is a core national security interest and a core moral responsibility of the U.S. Our security is affected when masses of civilians are slaughtered, refugees flow across borders, and murders wreak havoc on regional stabilities and livelihoods. America's reputation suffers, and our ability to bring about change is constrained when we are perceived as idle in the face of mass atrocities and genocide. Research bears this out. Daniel Milton of West Point finds that changing from the 25th to the 75th percentile of refugees increases transnational terror by 91.8%, and Adian Salehan of the University of North Texas finds that every 100,000 refugees, increasing the probability of state collapse by 85%. This is uniquely problematic because, as James Piazza of UNC writes, failing states have 10 to 15 times more transnational terror than stable states. The situation in Iraq and Syria certainly meets the threshold of destruction. Noressa Esmir, the Migration Policy Institute, estimates that 3 million people are internally displaced in Iraq. Peter Beinhardt of The Atlantic says the Yazidis are at risk of being wiped off the face of the earth. The minority rights group International writes that ISIS committed several executions, sexual violence, and torture that amount to crimes against humanity and possibly genocide. External intervention is important to stemming the killings. As John Western of Foreign Affairs writes, even when civil wars do not stop right away, external intervention often mitigates violence against civilians. This is because being aimed at preventing mass atrocities often force would-be killers to divert resources away from slaughtering civilians and towards defending themselves. This phenomenon means that even when interventions fail to end civil wars or resolve factional differences immediately, they can still protect civilians. Matthew Crane of Worcester confirms this empirically. Finding external intervention with just a single actor reduces the probability of killing escalating by 17%. Airstrikes are insufficient. As Richard Lim of the National Security Watch explains, reliance primarily on air power is not likely to be sufficient to degrade and destroy ISIL, but especially since it has acquired large swaths of territory. He furthers that the effectiveness of air power declines as ISIL targets inevitably disperse. Use of ground forces can help force the enemy to mass together to defend themselves on their territory, increasing their vulnerability to attacks from the air. Seth Jones of RAND corroborates even unsuccessful offensive actions that force terrorist units or cells to stay perpetually on the move to avoid destruction reduce their capability. Constant pursuit makes it dangerous for them to rest, and even the threat of military force may be critical to exhaust terrorists and deter their state sponsors. Matthew Dunn, former MI6 counterterrorism operative, concludes, the difference in combat effectiveness between Western troops and ISIL is stark. If they confronted each other in Iraq and northern Syria, ISIL could be beaten in weeks, if not or months. Thus we affirm.
Sometime before my rebuttal, can I just see like the thing that says that they could be defeated in weeks?
Yeah, do you want to know?
I don't really mind particularly.
I have it up.
Okay.
Here you go.
Okay. Do you mind if I keep it across?
I mean, we can actually deny you. But if possible, could you return it as soon as possible? Just 'cause you
Yeah. Would the judges be okay if I like pass it back to him in the middle of crossfire?
Lovely. Thank you.
Oh wait, are you guys running preps?
No, we thought you were.
Oh no.
Because
We're
you
not.
can't interact.
You guys
No,
ready?
I was gonna pass it back to him.
You ready for crossfire?
Okay, we're ready. Yeah. So I don't know how that's gonna be marked.
All three
Intense
judges.
from everyone, or?
We
Okay.
all three judges ready?
I'm ready.
Can a country be morally obligated to kill its citizens?
Morally obligated to kill its own citizens? I mean, the death penalty, I guess, some people can contend.
Okay, do you have a question?
So, when you talk specifically about other troops pulling out,
Yeah,
you talk about this the troops pulling out would be the 40,000 strong force.
yeah.
It has like the 40,000 strong force, which is like the alliance of like what, Egypt, United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
Have they like made a public statement saying they would pull out if Americans come in?
No,
Or is there a
but-
proof of this? Just general
We
statistics.
established through the Traub card that there's a clear trade-off between American presence in the region
is the-
and the creation of these forces.
Okay,
like
is the
the
Traub card talking generally about like in cross history trends or specific to the Iraq situation?
He says like, wait, I don't know. You tell like specific like he says American abdication is what allows things like the Arab League to rise, and the opposite will happen. And we'll
Wait, no, I'm asking, has there been any indication by the organization, the 40,000 troops, said, if U.S. troops go in, we will not?
I mean, if you want to look at history, it's happened in places Iraq, as we established with the first half of our contention. Now, can I ask you
What
a
happened in
question?
Iraq?
like they're heavily dependent on us, as we read at the
So
bottom
what
of the
happened
first part contention.
with the other troops going in?
Like they can't protect themselves against external security
Wait,
threats.
didn't
we
the
read
fact
in
that
the
they're
first
like we
contention.
gave them troops give them the only meaningful hope of ever holding them off? Because by themselves they seem to be pretty weak.
Sure, we gave them short-term hope, but now in the long term, they can't withstand any external pressure.
Would they have
Can I
been
ask you a
stronger
question?
without our arms? Are you saying? Would they be stronger?
I'd
without
argue
us?
that in the long term, we've set them up for the 6 times chance of like a failed state, as we established at the bottom of our contention. But can I
Okay.
ask you a
What is?
question?
Okay, sure.
So the resolution's in like the present tense, the status quo, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So that 6-fold increase, right? We tend to support states that are already pretty weak, right?
I guess so. Rob.
So how do you know that that's causal, that it's making them weak, and it's not this kind of states we tend to support are those that are already predisposed towards weakness?
I mean, I guess like we can show you the study, but like insofar as like we show you that like holistically they find that they're 6 times more likely to fail.
Okay.
Like
I'm saying the fact that we're supporting it is not making them 6 times more likely. We're saying we tend to support
Okay,
states
you
that
don't-
are more likely to fail already.
Okay,
You
can I
have
ask a question? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So you talk about like America's reputation at the
Yeah.
like, is that like okay? So like, I guess first of all, to clarify, is that like the only impact you're deriving that you like actually link to your security interests
No,
from
what we
genocide?
tell you is that genocides create refugee crises, which results in attacks against the United States.
Okay.
We also tell you we have to act.
Okay.
That's what we
Okay.
say after
So
every
for
genocide,
okay.
and it's about
Okay.
time we act.
So for
It's moral.
reputation, is America's reputation good right now? I just want to clarify it.
It's mixed, depends where you are. Like certain parts of the world, they like us.
Okay. Wait. So like, would you say like overall, are you trending more towards like a good reputation or a bad reputation?
I'd say it's pretty complicated.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Sure. So when you talk about like the Shia militias,
Yes.
if you negate the resolution, what happens to the Shia militias?
What happens to the Shia militias?
Yeah.
I mean, like what we're told. You tell me.
Well, where Sam's going to bring it up from Tapia Borders is if you do negate the resolution, the Shia militias run the show. The affirmative is the only one giving a probability, being able to rein them in, regulate them, make sure the human rights
Tim will tell you
abuses
that's not
do
true in the
occur.
long run.
Okay.
Okay. We'll run rapid